recording. And again, start with introductions. My name is Chris McKinney. I'm an education specialist for GEAR UP, and I'm coming to you live from Edinburgh in my office. And today's topic is criminal justice. And we started off this morning with a recent UT RGV grad, Crystal, and now we're going to take it to that next step of what she would be doing eventually, and that is having a criminal justice profession. And Henry's going to talk about his years of experience in the field, both the Border Patrol and then what doors have opened since then. So very excited to turn the camera and the microphone over to Henry, who's joining us from Dallas, Texas. Take it away, Henry.
Thanks, Chris. I appreciate you guys inviting me once again. I was on here last year, so thanks again for having me. And of course, the dynamics have changed, right? So I left the Valley and now I live in Dallas. So thank you guys once again for inviting me. So my background is that I actually started grade school down in Monte Alto.
Wow.
Way back in the late 60s. My father was actually a principal down there in 1969, 1970, and then became assistant superintendent in Ed Couch. And then, so I graduated from high school, Ed Couch Elsa, in 1986. In 1988, I was very fortunate that I had the opportunity to join the U.S. Border Patrol, and I left the Valley. I went to El Paso, so I served in the U.S. Border Patrol for 25 years. I served as a Border Patrol agent out in the field in El Paso, and then I moved to a little town called Falfurrias, Texas. I'm sure you guys are aware of it, where I was actually a canine handler. Narcotics detection and human detection, smuggling was my specialty with my canine. I went back to McAllen as a supervisory agent. Spent some time there, and then went to Harlingen as a second-line supervisor. During that time, I was actually reassigned to Washington, so I went up to D.C. for a total of about 18 months on a long-term and short-term assignments. And then I came back to the Valley, where the last 5 years of my career, I actually served as the lead public affairs officer, and I stood up the communications division. So it was during that time that I decided that it was time for me to go back to college. I actually quit my college career, second year into it, to take the opportunity to join the Border Patrol. I was very fortunate that I was able to do that. Those types of opportunities are few and far between. I took a big chance when I did that. But before I retired, I went back to college there at Pan Am, and I was actually in the last graduating class of UT Pan Am in the summer of 2015. And I did get my degree. I finished my degree in criminal justice with the minor in global security studies, which is a great program there at UTPA, and it's available to you locally. While I transitioned out of the public sector with working for the government, I came to work for a private security company called G4S, Global Force Secure Solutions. And it was then that that my eyes really opened up to what security was all about. I think we think about criminal justice, and we study criminology, and we study all of these things, and we do this with the public sector in mind, right? Because we want to be public servants, and we think about being police officers, serving the federal government, serving the state government. Excuse me. And so we continue to think about the public service part of it. And it was when I came into the private sector that I really started to realize how much more is out there. Granted, my career was great. I can't say enough about having worked for the government. It was an excellent career. But coming into the private sector, I really started to see what other opportunities are out there. Working for Global Force Secure Solutions, overseeing their Texas operations was very rewarding. And then just by chance, I happened upon the job that I work at now. So I am now the director or the manager of security for the Texas operations for NBC, Universal, which is owned by Comcast Television, and we also own Telemundo. So I oversee physical and personal security for the 4 Telemundo stations that NBC owns in Texas, which are McAllen, San Antonio, Houston, and Dallas. And then we also own the NBC local station here in Dallas. And so with that comes the responsibility of physical security of the buildings, personnel security of about 400 employees that we have. To add to that, we also do shows like the Today Show. We do Mad Money, we do NBC, MSNBC, CNBC, anything to do with NBC when they come into Texas. The security responsibility falls on my office to make sure that that during these live shots we've got adequate security coverage. So my point is, when we go into criminal justice, we always think about the public sector, but we don't really look into the private sector. And it's unfortunate because oftentimes, and even having gone through college, we don't really discuss how many opportunities are out there within the private sector. But I think there were so many more doors that were opened up to me when I did finish my degree. I think having completed the post-secondary, bachelor's degree really opened up a lot more opportunities for me. And I was explaining to Chris yesterday that even with the credentials that I have, which include the 25-year career, the degree, the 2 years in the private sector, I'm actually the junior, what we would call the junior man when you look at the entire global security operations for NBC Universal. So, but I could never have been here had I not completed, that 4-year post high school degree. So, I think it's important to note, if you're going into this business, whether it's in the private sector or in the public sector, one of the key factors here is every company now, whether it's NBC or a security company such as G4S, they will all do a complete now and thorough background investigation, which includes obviously your current drug use, past drug use. They look at your financial records. One of the biggest disqualifiers, unfortunately, is a poor financial record, because you become high risk, right? So in the security industry, if you owe a lot of money, then you're high risk, and you can become vulnerable to somebody who may want to take advantage of that and say, hey, here's $50,000. Let me do something criminal, and you can just turn a blind eye to it. And so I can tell you right now, as high school students, you need to start looking at your financial future, making sure that you don't get yourself into financial debt. If you do get student loans, which is fine, make sure that when it comes time when those student loans mature, that we continue to pay those, because those are federally funded. The government, if you're going to go into a government position, the government is very strict to make sure that you've been paying back those student loans. And again, they're gonna question your character. So they're always gonna find out who you hang out with, who your friends are. They're gonna look at your social media websites, whether it's your Twitter account, your Facebook, your Instagram. All of these things that we're doing today can reflect negative upon us 3 years from now, 4 years from now. So we need to be conscious of what it is that we're doing from a social media aspect. It may be all fun and games today, but you need to realize that when you post something on social media and it goes out there, it's out there forever. You can't throw a fishing line and reel it back in. It doesn't work that way. So once that picture is out there, once that text message is out there, or that cartoon is out there, that could come back and reflect negative upon your character, 4 years from now, 5 years from now. So just be conscious of that and be aware of that. I think the other big disqualifier in this industry is the polygraph exams. So many companies now, even within the private sector, are relying heavily on the polygraph exam. And generally, it's not what you tell the investigator that gets you in trouble. It's what you don't tell or what you lie about that they later find out about. Okay, so when it comes time to do your background investigation, if you did something that you're not so proud of, it's okay to admit to it. It's okay to tell your background investigator, look, I did this, because it shows character when you present your errors to the investigator versus them having to find out about it from a third party. Generally when you admit it and you bring it to the forefront, that says a lot more about your character than again, them having to sneak around and find things out about you that they would have normally known. So I can't stress that enough. But you need to realize that the things that you do today, even if you're a junior or a senior or getting into college, those things that you do today can have a severe impact on an industry where they're looking for, somebody with a clear background. So just make sure that you're cognizant of that and you're conscious of that before you post that next, that next picture or send that, perhaps racial comment or, something like that. I mean, we need to be very conscious of that nowadays. And unfortunately or fortunately, whichever way you want to look at it, at the end of the day, somebody's always watching. Somebody's going to find, there's a timestamp out there. Everything that you do today, whether it's you stop to buy gas at a fuel pump, there's going to be a record of it. There's video cameras just around every corner, every city, every municipality now is going to, cameras, even just at surveillance cameras, even just at traffic lights, just to see who's out there. So we need to be very, aware of what it is that we're doing, because unfortunately some of these things will come back to haunt us, 2 or 3 years down the road. I'll be glad to take any questions. I think one of the other things, having grown up in the Valley, it's our culture, and I grew up. My father and his family were from Mexico, and I think because of our tight culture and that family culture, we always tend to stick together. But you've got to realize that there are opportunities beyond San Antonio, and there's opportunities beyond, even outside the state of Texas. I think I was very fortunate that my parents always encouraged us to just go away, even if it's for 2 weeks or a month or 2 months. And I was fortunate again that I had that opportunity. Having spent time in Washington, having spent time in San Diego, and throughout the country, I actually went into South Africa to go teach some law enforcement courses through State Department down. The FBI has what they call the International Law Enforcement Academy down in Botswana, Africa. And so I had the opportunity to go to take advantage of that. And these are all opportunities I never would have been able to take advantage of had I not had the clear credentials, the background, and the position that I had. So it was a very rewarding career. I think one of the other things that I was very fortunate that I was able to take advantage of is the fact that within the federal government, you can retire from federal law enforcement, right? From a law enforcement position only. Not every federal government career is this way, but in the federal law enforcement, if you do 25 years within federal, what is a position that is considered federal law enforcement, with 25 years of service, regardless of how old you are, you can retire with a full pension, and you walk away with your health benefits, your vision, your dental, plus a pension. So those are the things that we need to think about when we're considering a career, for the future. I know that 25 years for you guys sounds like a long time, but it seems just like overnight that I started my career in El Paso and ended it in Edinburgh 25 years later. But that opportunity allowed me to take the next step. So now I can actually stay home, collect a pension, and then go out and, I was young enough. I started when I was 20, so I retired when I was 45, and I'm young enough to where I could start an entirely different career, or a whole new career. And the good thing about the company that I'm at now is that I can leave here 10 years from now fully vested, also with a second pension. So these are things that we don't think about when we're 18, 16, 17, 18, right? Because really nobody has told us. And so we need to start thinking about those things today too, because I guarantee it's gonna get here just that fast. If you guys have any questions, I'll be glad to entertain them. I can't think of anything else here that we're, Chris, unless you have something that you want me to address.
Great advice. Yeah, if you don't mind, we'll kind of have a little banter back and forth as we wait for questions to come in. And I know Monte Alto will have one because you were really inquisitive the last session. But going back to your roots, again, starting Monte Alto, then Ed Couch Elsa, you said your family's in education. I know your sister Doris, and she works at UTRGV as well. So there's a lot of education in your background. What kind of chose you to, or influenced you to choose the path of law enforcement and, initially Border Patrol, and since then? Talk about that a little bit, about what you did in high school, maybe who inspired you. Was it a teacher? Was it a show?
So I was, as a kid, we used to travel a lot into Mexico. As I said, my grandfather lived in Mexico, so we would travel a lot. So I was very intrigued by the operations at ports of entry where you combine immigration was there, customs was there. And then my grandmother lived on a little ranch north of Algeria, so we would always go to the checkpoint. And so that type, I was always curious about what the Border Patrol was all about. And there was actually 2 movies that were out back in the late 70s. One was called Borderline, and the other one's called The Border. One has Jack Nicholson, and it's actually based around an area where I worked in El Paso, which obviously when I saw the movie, I never would have thought that I would be working where he was. And so that really spurred my curiosity with regard to law enforcement and the Border Patrol in particular. And I love the outdoors. I was an athlete in high school, and so we were constantly outside. We were running. We were, always in the outdoors. I was also in scouting. I started in Cub Scouts. I went through Webelos, and then I went into the Boy Scouts as an older scout. And so we were very active. Our scouting troop there in RGV and in Edcouch Elsa specifically, we had some great leaders. And they inspired us to do a lot. So I think my scouting experiences also had a lot to do with my influence with regard to my career and just my enjoyment for the outdoors. And typically, you work a 10-hour day within the Border Patrol, and 9 of those hours are going to be outside. The other 30 minutes, the other hours going to be tied up doing end of the shift paperwork or fueling up your car or whatever. But you spend a lot of time in the outdoors and oftentimes by yourself. So that was, it was really a great career. And I was really inspired by the outdoors and working out in the desert, the high desert in El Paso. We actually had a 65-mile span of border between El Paso and a place called Columbus, New Mexico. And sometimes there was only 2 of us working that area. And it was just great, to be in the outdoors. Now, with regard to the education, again, my father was first generation to be degreed. And then he really encouraged us. And so I was the last of all of my siblings to get my degree. We kind of laugh about it because I'm the youngest one and I was the first one to retire, but being the youngest one, I was the last one to finish my college career. And not even finish it because I'm actually starting to consider going back to work on my master's. On my wife's side,
I'm sorry, I don't have to send my students.
Was actually a trash collector.
Okay.
And my mother-in-law was a chef, but they inspired all of their kids to go to college. So on my wife's side, all of my sister-in-law, my brother-in-laws are all degreed as well. And lastly, my daughter was the last of the grandkids to get degreed, and she and I actually graduated together and walked together.
Wow. Yeah, we had a question. Yeah, the first session that came in, I think from either Mercedes or Westlaco, asking if you need a degree to get into the Border Patrol. And I know you don't, but you can talk about that. But talk about the advantage of a degree. I'm going to mute multi-alto real quick.
Yeah. Is it possible that we can change our groups?
Okay. There we go, Henry. I actually muted you. It kind of jumped around, so I took over the screen. Okay, you want to talk about Border Patrol and the requirements to get in and the advantages of having a degree?
So within the Border Patrol, they have a no degree requirement. They look for at least 2 years of work experience, even if they're looking for generally, work experience within a management position. If you had a 2-year career within as a shift leader or shift supervisor at McDonald's, something like that would qualify you. But they rate you based on your education. So there's a rating system. So they take all the things into consideration. Obviously, if you've got a degree, you're going to rate higher. If you've got prior military experience, you're going to rate higher as well. So, those are the things that they look at. And if you can combine those experiences, more power to you. If you've got the degree with a military background, wow, your opportunities are endless within this industry.
Okay. Excellent. Good advice. Just curious because some of the kids are, asking about that, and they need to go, but on that information to make the best choice for their situation.
Now, Chris, I will say also that within the government, within the federal government, the Customs and Border Protection, which Border Patrol is a part of, is probably one of the only agencies that does not require a degree. Everybody else, when you talk about the U.S. Marshals, you talk about FBI, alcohol, tobacco, and firearms, State Department, Secret Service, any of these other agencies will require a minimum of a bachelor's degree.
Mr. Solis, I'm going to unmute. It's kind of hard to read. Something about student in the academy. Can your class, someone read out that question to us, Mr. Solis?
We don't have a mic, do we? Can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you, Mr.
Oh, there it is. Okay, a student's asking, how early can a student start at the academy? Can they do it right after high school?
You're talking about the Border Patrol Academy?
I believe so.
Yeah, sure. So the minimum requirement is 18, the age of 18. It's rare that they would pick up, that they would hire somebody at that age, but it is possible. I was, like I said, I was 20 when I went in, and I was the youngest in my class, and I think that's about the youngest somebody would be able to qualify, simply because you've got to meet certain experience levels, and it would be tough to meet those experience levels at the age of 18, but it's possible. But I wouldn't recommend it. I would tell somebody, you know what, go get your degree, and if you want to go into the Border Patrol, then go into the Border Patrol, because there's so many more opportunities that would come after you combine that experience with the degree.
Good advice. Mr. Ramos, do you have a question or multi-alto? I noticed you unmute your mic.
Yes, like my kids had to go to lunch, Chris and Henry, so I'm a little sorry for that. They had to go to lunch because they have to attend the first lunch period.
Okay.
So, but I'll continue here and advise them as to what went on.
Okay, excellent. Okay, if you have any questions for them, or if they can get them back to you, again, we're recording this so you can show them the final version a little bit later. Thank you, Albert. Okay, Mr. Solis, and I privately chatted you. If there's any way that you can move your screen up to the class, we would love to see the kiddos and have some interaction, as we did with multi-alto earlier. If you don't have that availability, I understand that as well. Just nice to have some faces to look at, especially when they want to come up and ask a question. Thanks. Let's get back. You talked about joining the Border Patrol perhaps without a degree. Are there any opportunities? Let's say they went into 2 years of college and they just really needed to start making money for the family. Whatever. Will the government help, or do they have programs to continue their study while they're working? Pay, scholarships, anything along those lines, sir?
Yes, they do. As a matter of fact, that's a good question. They do. Government, Department of Homeland Security does have a tuition, what they call the CTAP, the tuition assistance program.
Okay.
Which is actually really good. The challenge there is that, and I did it, but it was rough, is that you're working shift work while you're taking classes. And so it's really difficult, because some of those classes, not all the classes, especially down at Pan Am or UTRGV now, were not offered online. So I could take, it was a hybrid, right? I would take 6 hours online, and then 6 hours I would actually have to present myself to at lecture. So it's very challenging. It's very difficult, but it's possible. I would say if you can push forward and finish the degree, that would be great. The other part to this is that a lot of these agencies will start recruiting you in your third year into college and allow you to finish your fourth year or finish your degree before they assign you to a post or bring you into the academy. So they're going to work with you too, because they see the benefit of having somebody with that postgraduate degree, post-high school degree. So the other part to this is that once you're within a government agency, there are so many levels, all the way up to the executive level, whether it's the chief of the Border Patrol, or the Commissioner of Customs and Border Protection, who actually is from Edinburgh, who formerly the former Commissioner of Customs and Border Protection, who was previously the chief of the entire Border Patrol, is actually a native of Edinburgh. And he succeeded a former Edinburgh graduate as well. Gus de la Viña was from Edinburgh, and David Aguilar, who retired as the Commissioner of Customs and Border Protection, was also from Edinburgh. So, but those opportunities, they're going to, you will be considered based on your experience and based on your schooling. But again, they're going to look at, what else do you bring to the table, and it becomes very competitive at those executive levels. So obviously, the more degrees you have and the more background you have, the more opportunity you're going to have.
Excellent. Great advice. Is there any kind of master's program or anything involved that might take you, again, rate you higher, as you mentioned earlier?
Actually, there is. I mean, pretty much every university is going to have a master's degree within criminal justice. But
Okay.
there are other, because your bachelor's degree may be in criminal justice, you may want to consider a master's degree in something else, whether it's, business management or leadership or management as a whole. So that you can have your education is diverse. The other thing here is that a lot of these government agencies, and even within the private sector, such as NBC Universal, they offer master's programs that they will assist you with. I know with MDHS, they offer Harvard School of Business degrees. So as a part of your training and a part of your career, you're actually working, and they're putting you through college. However, you can't get into that program if you don't have your 4-year degree. So, again, that's there's an opportunity there at no cost to you, because they pick up the entire tab on those types of programs. And NBC Universal offers the same type of scenario.
Excellent. So you definitely have a value in your education, and definitely, I really appreciate your effort. That sets a Gear Up message right there, that we're really pushing these students to graduate next year from high school, class of 2017. And we're also challenging them to take, more stringent courses so that they'll be more successful when they do reach college. And that second degree, the bachelor's, will really open doors. There was a question that came in last time about getting in Border Patrol, getting in FBI, DPS. Do you need to have a criminal justice degree, or do they look at those that have something else? Or tell us some about that, please.
Yeah, so one of the things that when I did recruiting, I think one of the things that I really pushed was a criminal justice degree. Any degree is great, right? But when you're looking at a specific skill set within a government agency, especially today with so much technology being out there, so much technology being utilized in the law enforcement field through forensics and just the way it applies now. When it comes to being a cop or to being a law enforcement officer, that's what academies are for, right? We're going to send you to the academy, and we're going to teach you the policing part of it. So if you can get a degree outside of criminal justice, or even a second degree with your CJ, that would really benefit you as well. For example, in my case, I have the criminal justice bachelor's, but my minor is global security studies, and I think that the global security studies actually opens more doors for me than the CJ degree, because of the fact that there's a lot of emphasis today on what's happening not only within the United States, but what's happening globally. And when you're working for an operation such as NBC Universal, I mean, obviously we own a lot of properties throughout Central and South America, Latin America, and so we're constantly, right now we own the rights to the Olympics, right? And so the Olympics are going to be in Brazil right now. So our focus is what's happening globally, what's happening within Brazil that's going to impact our operations while we're down there. We also bought the rights to FIFA. So, the next 4 World Cups, which is over the next 16 years, we own the rights to that as well. So now we're going to have to look, 2 years down the road to see, okay, now that the Olympics are over, 2 years from now, we've got the next FIFA, and what's going to be happening in that part of the world that can impact our operations. So it's the criminal justice part is great, but if you could go beyond that and look at other opportunities and how you can apply, other parts of your degree, whether it's in global security studies or economics or information technology, which is, by the way, is it's booming right now within the security industry as well. So,
Okay.
these are things that you may want to consider also.
Excellent. Now, you've been kind of just teasing us with your talk about the Olympics and soccer FIFA and all that. Tell us a little bit day in the life of you and maybe what opportunities might be underneath you as far as who you might look for security detail, and just kind of talk a little bit about your responsibilities and where they might consider looking down the road.
Sure. So I think when I first got here, actually I've only been here, I got here January of this year, but in my first 4 months, I've had the opportunity, to travel. My next trip, hopefully within the next couple of weeks, will be to New York, because our headquarters is at 30 Rockefeller Center, which is where they film Saturday Night Live, where they do Fallon does his late night show. On the Universal side, we also own the Universal Studios throughout the country, which is down in Florida, and then we've got LA, we've got Universal Studios. If you guys ever watch Mario Lopez in the Evening, that's actually from one of our properties in LA. So in the first 4 months, I've actually had to, part of my security detail was going down to Houston to provide make sure that we had the proper security for the Today Show. We had MSNBC filming live, and we had CNBC filming live. So my job is to make sure that we've got the proper, law enforcement presence for security, to provide security for the Today Show set, for NBC, CNBC, MSNBC, Hardball, and some of these different television shows. We also have the back lot up in Chicago. So Chicago Fire is filmed up there. Chicago PD is filmed up there. And then, of course, the studio. So this is all evolving for me, and it's all just starting to grow, and I'm really starting to learn a lot. So right now, my goal is to look to see what's going to happen with Brazil, because obviously we're going to be supporting them down there. Recently one of my assignments when I first came on board was making sure that we had the right security combination for the Pope's visit, when we sent Telemundo and Lester Holt out of NBC into Juarez. So these are the responsibilities that lie on the global security office here at NBC. So it's just a lot of opportunity. And again, we look at what's happening within the public sector, but we don't realize what's actually happening in the private sector with regard to security and law enforcement.
Too cool. So what's your staff? I mean, I know you're big exec, what all? You said you have to get security detail, man. That sounds like the president. Tell me about that.
You're looking at the staff, right? So actually, the way it works is we've got a team of about 35 global. The NBC Universal Global Security team consists of about 35 folks, and so we support each other, right? We are all assigned to a certain post. For example, there's a security, one guy that's in charge of security for NBC News. There's one guy who's in charge of security at 30 Rockefeller Center. There's one guy in charge of the studios, one guy in charge of the parks. And so each one of us has an assignment. Me, for example, I have the 4 properties, right? The Dallas property, which is 2 stations, Telemundo and NBC, and then the other 3 properties in McAllen, San Antonio, and Houston. And so what I do is I go down there and I do a physical assessment of the building, and then I make a recommendation to the company and say, okay, I need to hire a staff of 20 contract security officers to maintain 24/7 operations at this particular studio or this particular set, and this is what they're going to be doing. Then when we have a live shoot, for example, on the MSN, when the Today Show was here on Super Tuesday, we go in there a day or 2 before, we do an assessment of the facility, and we say, okay, now I need X number of off-duty police officers who are commissioned through the state, and then I need so many security guards to stay with our equipment overnight, because we've got expensive equipment. I mean, you're talking tens of millions of dollars when you're thinking about live trucks and radars and satellites and cameras and all of the technology that goes with the mobile shoot, like a live shoot like that. So my job is basically to go down there, do the assessment, and then contract it out to a company such as G4S or Securitas or what we call ODS, off-duty services, which is nothing but cops who are commissioned through that state of Texas within the geographical area where we're looking. And then those cops will come in on their day off, and then we're paying them to provide a service to us. And so that's how that works.
Excellent. I've been kind of hogging the questions. I'm sorry. Students, do y'all have any more questions out there? Thank you, Noelia, Mercedes, for joining us. You had someone join us in the first session. I appreciate y'all. Same with Monte Alto. They're my back-to-backers. And welcome Donna North. We've got at least a couple, maybe more. There's an Adelaida and a Charlene's class. I didn't designate which campus you're from, but I know Angie said that she had several teachers waiting on us. And again, I apologize for clicking the wrong link earlier. Any questions? Again, you can go to the chat feature for those few classes that do not have a video feed, or you can unmute your microphone and you can just say it. We just won't hear. I mean, we'll hear you, but won't see the face associated with that question. There's two ways to pose a question to Henry Mendiola. That's plenty of time waited for a question. Well, we'll continue our conversation then, Henry. Oh, go ahead. Someone started a question. Okay, you've had travels all over. What are some of your highlights? Some of the posts maybe in the Border Patrol, El Paso. What are some of the areas? You said you worked in D.C., you've been in California.
I think, well, obviously, some of the highlights, I think, with regard to travel was when I, got to go into South Africa and then down into Botswana. I think that was really great. I actually got to go on safari, on a photography safari. I didn't go on a hunting safari, but that was actually, a really cool highlight now, simply because I was there on somebody else's dime. Somebody else was paying for it. I didn't have to. So, anytime you can, and I think the bigger part of that was that they actually gave me time off while I was up there. So I was able to go and do, stuff on my off time, which was really neat. I think also a highlight of my career was within the last 5 years. The last 5 years of my career with Borkchill down in the valley was I stood up the communications division. So when I first came into the agency, there was only 4,000 agents throughout the world in 1988. When I left, there was 22,000, 4,000 just in the valley. And so how do you, if you're the leader of that 4,000, that group of 4,000, how do you get your message to them, right? So that was my job. My challenge was to figure out how do we take the chief's message and cascade that down to 4,000 employees. And so that was part of my challenge. But as a part of that, I also did the external piece. So if any of you have seen National Geographic Border Wars, that was actually a product that I delivered for the government. The last year that I was there, we actually filmed the entire season in McAllen. And that was challenging simply because I had to make sure that every film crew, and we had 12 film crews down there, 12 film crews of 2 people. And so my job was to make sure that I put them where the action was, but on top of that, make sure that they were safe and that they had the proper, security measures in place so that they wouldn't, their liability, because, this is a private company that's coming into film and we were responsible for them. I think the other part to that was having to work closely with Secretary Napolitano, because at the time that I was in RGB, we were the focus. And so the secretary would come down about every 6 weeks, and her Secret Service detail didn't have enough people down in the Rio Grande Valley. So we would actually do all the logistics, provide the fleet, provide all the manpower and staffing for security within for the Secret Service. And I think that was a great opportunity for me, where I got to visit with her, personally. And we would talk about, what was happening, and we would give her all the briefings. To actually sit there with somebody at such a high level and discuss, I'm thinking, well, here's a kid from Calchosa who's actually talking to somebody who has the president's ear. And so that was, I guess you don't realize it until people tell you. They're like, hey, but it was quite impressive. I really enjoyed that part of my career. And reflecting on it now, I realize, yeah, you know what, I did it. So that was cool. And then again, having lived in DC and worked over there, I don't think I ever would have had that opportunity elsewhere.
Excellent. There's a question that came in from Mark Solis's class in Donna North. And they have a question about canine. I don't know if there was a gentleman that was kind of sitting by the camera. I think he was going to ask the question, but I'll start it, and then if he wants to join in as well. Do they raise canines from puppies and train them, or do you contract like an outside agency and then gives you the adult that already has the skills necessary? Talk about that.
Yeah. So the way it used to work when we, so the canine program within the Border Patrol is relatively new. The first dogs to come into service were actually in Falfurrias and in Laredo, and they came on board in 1986. So for some of you that sounds like a long time ago, but in reality it really isn't. The program is new. And so in 1986 we were actually contracting with a vendor out of Germany for a particular dog. We were looking for a Belgian Malinois. That's the breed that we were looking for, simply because those dogs were bred. The gene pool out in Germany was specific to the police work. Germany has been using dogs in police work for years, decades, and so they were the experts. And so they had that gene pool that we needed for the canines, looking for the drives that we needed to do the job that we did. And so that's how we started. We started with bringing in dogs from Germany with a vendor, and then by 1990. Actually, by about 2000, 14 years into the program, we actually started to breed our own. We started a breeding program in El Paso, the El Paso canine facility. Okay. So we started, by that time we had enough dogs to where we were able to crossbreed. We could breed, and those dogs were bred specifically for our purpose. And so we actually, I believe DHS now continues to do a hybrid program where they do their own breeding, but they also bring in outside dogs, so that gene pool doesn't get too small, right?
Okay.
But yeah, they do look for specific traits, and that's the hunt trait and the prey drives and all these other drives that are associated with the mission.
Okay, excellent. Thank you for answering. I've got a question from Mark Solis's class. There's a student that has a Trump question. Go ahead.
You're on the mic.
I'm on the mic.
You're live.
If Donald Trump becomes president, how will the wall affect your job?
I couldn't quite hear the question, Chris. What was that?
I think it's right there. If Donald Trump becomes president.
If Donald Trump becomes president, how will the wall affect your job?
Okay. So, I'll tell you what, that's a good question, because everybody says, the wall is the wall, and, the wall is about, it became very political. And I will tell you, because the time that I spent in DC, I was engaged in a lot of the actual initial building of the fence, right? We don't call it a wall, it's a fence. So, actually in the Rio Grande Valley, you can actually call it a wall. I'm gonna have to take this call real quick.
Okay.
You guys give me just 1 second.
Certainly.
Marta. Well, Marta, can you give me about 10 minutes and I'll call you guys right back? Okay, thank you. Bye. Sorry about that.
All right. We're running long. I apologize. Thank you so much for your time, Henry.
No problem. So we're talking about when the fence was initially built, right? We knew that the fence is not going to stop anybody. If you build a 14-foot fence, they're going to build a 15-foot ladder. We knew that, right? But the idea of the fence was not to keep people out. The idea was to buy time for the agents that were responding. So if you had, for example, and I'll try to draw it here. I don't know if you guys are able to see it. Let me get a marker because it'll be easier. But the idea.
So it's basically a deterrent. That makes sense.
Yeah, the idea is this. If you have the river and the river winds like this, right? Are you able to see that?
Yes, now I can.
Okay, and this is, let's say from point A to point B, that's 20 miles of river. But if you, as a crow flies, right? If you drew a straight line from here to here, it's only about 3 miles. So if you built a fence from here to here, you're actually blocking out 20 miles of river. Now, the idea was not to keep people out. The idea was to buy time so that agents can respond. And if a sensor south of the fence would go off, now you're providing what we call persistent impedance. And that persistent impedance is there. Now you set off the sensor, you've alerted agents that you're coming towards the fence, but now you need another 5 or 10 additional minutes to climb the fence and jump it. Okay, and that gave the agents just enough time to respond to the area so that they can make the effect the arrest. That's the idea behind the border fence. I will tell you that some of the rhetoric and some of the things that Mr. Trump has, some of the statements that he's made, I don't think he fully understands the concept of the border fence. And so right now he's just talking. He's making, he's making a lot of comments, and obviously he's looking to be elected. What I will say is that I don't think he understands the concept of what the fence was. It was strategically placed to give officials and agents on the ground time to respond so that they can effect the arrest. It wasn't a wall to keep people out. And, I think politically that it was driven that way during that time. And even today in some areas, right? It's been used in for political leverage. But I think at the end of the day, the fence that we have in place strategically does its job. And I know people are like, no, we don't need to build, we need to build bridges, not fences. But at the end of the day, there's an illegal immigration problem that we need to solve. And when we talk about comprehensive immigration reform, I'm not saying that people shouldn't come here. I'm the result of immigrants, right? So I think a lot of us are. Our parents came from, our parents or our grandparents or great-grandparents came from a foreign country. But at the end of the day, we have a problem in this country that we need to resolve. And perhaps the border fence is only one part of a strategic, entire comprehensive immigration reform project. And so it's going to take more than just a fence. And I'm not sure that Mr. Trump realizes exactly what he's saying when he talks about a border wall. So.
Yeah, no comment on Trump. There's a lot of stuff he doesn't understand. He's just going for publicity.
Yeah, of course.
In this soundbite, Anyway. Well, let's not get this into a political discussion, but I do appreciate it's a great question, and I like that explanation and your visual, because that makes perfect sense, that it does slow them down enough to give you some response time, and that there's a rationale, that you're not really keeping things out. I'll just build a bigger fence or a bigger ladder, to get over it.
Right.
But that makes sense. You can really, shorten the total distance of that winding river. So excellent explanation. Any other questions? I know he obviously has some meetings to get to. Again, we started late, and it was basically our fault. We were practicing, and I guess we maybe hit the practice Zoom or something.
I must have. I must have hit the wrong one when I called you guys in, so I apologize too. I mean,
we're just sitting here waiting and doing our emails, and finally get a phone call. Thank you, Angie, out there, for alerting us that we were on the wrong link. Anyway, any other questions? Great questions. Because we do need to let him resume his normal activities. His staff of one, that means he's got a lot on his shoulders, and he's got some things to touch. I see, Albert, you unmuted your microphone. Take it away, sir.
I just wanted to close out by telling Henry that I'm real proud to see that he's advanced to that level at the particular work with the government that he does, or with the private agency and security. At Cal Tulsa, we're way down here in the south, and now we're impacting all over. So I'm real proud of that. And Monte Alto as well. And La Villa, we're like a triage out here,
Yeah. Thank you, Albert. I will say, I was telling Chris yesterday that in having been here in Dallas, I met with the director of security for Pawn America. So you guys may realize, you may have seen pawn shops, Cash America pawn shops. Well, actually, the director of investigations and security for that company is retired from alcohol, tobacco, and firearms as the agent in charge here in Dallas. And he's actually a graduate of MAC. And then I just met another gentleman who was on the governor's detail for Governor Perry. He retired from that job and is now the director of security for AT&T here in Dallas. And he's a PSJA graduate. So there are some folks who have gone outside of the Valley and seeking other opportunities. And so.
Excellent. So the Valley, spreading our wings, taking advantage of opportunities.
They truly have. And so I'm glad to see that as well.
And what's cool now is like a brotherhood, even though you're not from the same exact community, you're from the Valley.
Right.
That's one thing that we try to tell our kids is that, yes, you're a Multi-Alto Blue Devil, or you're a Mercedes Tiger, or, Donna North Chief. But as you move from high school, you don't wear those Letterman jackets when you get to college. Now you're from the Valley. And, so you're from this collective of over 1 million individuals, and there's a lot of pride. And like you said, you're going to make connections to other people as you move out, and start a career and a new life. And that's going to be an instant bond, someone from just down the road, as they say, and so.
We've got about 400, just on this property that I'm at right now, we've got about 400 employees overall. So there's a marketing department, there's sales, there's broadcast, there's news anchors, there's, all of these things that come together that we don't think about. But within this area here, I know our national director of sales is from a Mercedes graduate. We have several folks. The general manager here who oversees the entire operation for Telemundo in Dallas, which is a huge operation. It's from Corpus. So yeah, the South Texas ties are out here, and you're right. It does. We start talking, and we still go back to our high school days because I remember when we used to be just saying. So, but yeah, you're right. Outside of that, we get here, there's a culture and there's a bond, and it's pretty neat to see that. So
excellent. Well, I don't see any more questions that are coming from the chat room. Noelia or Donna, anybody else have any other questions for us before we sign off? All right, Henry, I know, again, you're busy. You already missed a phone call. I know you're going to get back with them. I can't thank you enough for your time that you've spent, that you shared with us on your incredible adventure that's continuing, unfolding before you. I mean, a 25-year retired career of the Border Patrol and private practice, and now you got a second job that's going to really open doors. I'm jealous. I'd love for you to we'd come back and find out about your days down in Brazil at the Olympic. Are you going to get
let's hope so. Let's keep our fingers crossed.
that would be cool. And soccer, FIFA, and everything else that's going to open up. I mean, again, you're making us proud here from the Valley, and I wish you all the best. And I can't thank you enough for your wisdom that you're imparting on our kids, and hoping to guide them, inspire them to maybe chart a path that they weren't considering before this event. And so again, we're proud, and congratulations, and keep up the great work.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate the time, and actually that phone call is from McAllen. I've got to call him back. We're building a whole new station. We're building a whole new station in McAllen. Telemundo will have a new station that's going to open up here in about 6 weeks, and so we're putting all the security features into that building right now. So that's what this phone call is about. So
if you've got one more, I got one more question that's coming in from March Police class again.
Okay.
Yes, sir. This is the Trump class.
What team do you go for? For soccer?
On professional?
Yes.
Soccer?
Soccer.
Yes.
I've always supported, because I'm from the United States. I've always supported the U.S. in the World Cup. But if and when the U.S. gets thrown out, then I'm looking to Mexico, because that's where my my parents were from. So first is the U.S., second is Mexico. But when we're talking about the Dallas Cowboys, okay,
like.
Oh.
Yeah, no. So I kind of keep that hidden here in the office, because everybody here is from Dallas, and even though I'm a security guy, I am a security risk.
That's funny. I'm a Cowboy fan, so I got a Spurs fan, and I'm sorry they didn't make it, but now I'm rooting for. I'm also a Longhorn. If you see anything behind me, I'm puro Longhorn. And Kevin Durant's a former Longhorn playing for OKC, so I'm going for the Thunder. Again, I'm probably making some enemies out there for the Steph Curry. Hey, my daughter's at A&M, if you haven't heard. Awesome. Okay, now get back to class. Mr. Solis, your class, everybody else that's joining us this period or this session, I really appreciate the time, the questions. It's been great. Again, this is recorded. Speaking of recording, let me stop the recording because I'm just back.